Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and in today's journey through the star map, we're stopping off in a historically pretty piratey type of system, and that's going to be Nexus. Now, this system has had 3 names over the course of its lifespan, but today it remains Nexus, even after the UEE tried to remove some of that negative connotation by changing it to an older name. The name Nexus, though, is at least an appropriate name for this system in orbit around the blue-white type A star. Now, the initial discovery of Nexus happened back in 2445 by a UNE pilot named Dominic Thapa, and this scanning was taking place in Cathcart, which was a militarily classified system, and they were scanning for new jump points, which they obviously found, and thus named the system the oh-so-romantic name of UDS 2445309. When we first moved into the system, though, the military immediately saw a lot of promise here, and with a very mineral-rich asteroid belt and 5 planets, it seemed like a really good place to be, but there was a problem. You don't want civilians traveling through restricted systems to get to the new one. So the military decided to claim UDS 2443-09 for themselves, and they started practicing how to terraform on a smog planet, opening a base on another planet. And that went on for a while, but eventually the budgetary restraints ended up kicking in and prevented the military from really moving much further in this system. And while the UNE wasn't thrilled about the idea of having civilians moving at will through Cathcart, they were okay with the idea of a single corporation moving in, which would resulted in the sale of the mining rights in UDS-245-3-09 to the Hathor Group. While not quite as absurd as selling an entire system like we saw with the Stanton system, this system here that became Hathor and then Nexus clearly paved a way for that sort of behavior to take place in the future. So when Hathor moved into the system in 2468, there wasn't a government, there weren't police forces, or really any oversight whatsoever. And the Hathor Group had total control. And when you look at old star maps, you'll even see that they renamed the system to the Hathor system. And like we see with a lot of companies, as long as the profits are rolling in, they don't really care how their employees represent themselves. So this rowdy group of miners with no police or government really looking in on them became notoriously associated with gambling and violence and countless other acts that were considered illegal activities in other parts of the universe. And this system had such a focus on mining that there weren't really other ways for people to earn legitimate money. So crime quickly became number 2 in the economic power rankings. And once we had 3 more jump points that were found that opened up traffic from Ellis, Min, and Hades, those gangs ended up moving in to stalk the mining ships, to prey on the other criminals, or really do anything to make some money. And based on the population of miners, criminals, and nothing else, no one really wanted to come visit here or move their businesses here. Meaning that once when Hathor had basically cleared out the system of mining to a point where they stopped earning big profits, they left. And the system was left with little resources and only crime, so what do you think happened? The population swelled. But the people that were moving in were gangs, drug dealers, and all sorts of criminals. And the expansion was so fast that they actually thought that it could end up replacing Spider as the center of the criminal underworld, which is where the name Nexus comes from, a crossroads of crime. For most of the time, while the system was known as Nexus, the UEE didn't really pay that much attention to it. However, once they did enter the system and found out that these criminals not only wouldn't run from them, but would actually aggressively open fire on any law enforcement or military ships, it became pretty clear that something needed to happen. The UEE has now implemented a basic infrastructure here with a legitimate military and advocacy presence, but that certainly doesn't mean this is a safe place now. So while you may hear that trade and shipping lanes are relatively safe, the criminals have not given up their claim to the system. Now, the closest planet to the star is Nexus 1, and is a proto-planet sharing the same tradition many others do, with no life on it, no resources, and tremendous heat. Nexus 2 has a very dense nitrogen atmosphere that played host to that experimental terraforming by the UEE, all of which failed to end up converting it into a breathable atmosphere. Now, Nexus 3 is a world that has a naturally habitable place, and it played host to the Hathor Group before they moved out, and then the criminals took over those abandoned facilities. And this place was actually the primary target that the UEE had when they decided to move in and eradicate the illegal activities from the system. And after forcefully removing the pirates from the system, or at least getting them off of this planet to a certain extent, the UEE was able to set up a permanent presence here, and it's now kind of considered classified with restrictions on who can actually end up landing on Nexus 3. Now, Nexus 4 is known as Lago after some fiction about a place with the same name that became this pirate haven because the planet was really starting to share that same type of demographic. Fast forward to today, the UEE has an advocacy station here. There's local police here, as well as a relatively small population of people that have moved in to kind of conduct a legal business. But it's mostly still a crappy place. there's families of service people who are working on Nexus 3 who have no other choice but to stay on Nexus 4. In all, what you end up having is all these little small settlements that are protected by barricades to avoid criminals. The place is really just no dream of moving to, so if you want to come into this system and you're a pirate, great, but if you're wanting to have a nice high-rise or something, it's not going to be here. And the last planet that we have in the system is Nexus 5, which is known as the Red God, and that's a gas giant with large swirls of dark reds and browns. But the criminals on Lago felt that this place had special powers, though that's probably just nonsense. So that's the Nexus system in a short kind of wrap-up, and it's a place that is probably not very interesting for most people, at least interesting enough to bring you here. It might be interesting enough to read about. However, there are some that I think could make some easy money here. And outside of this being a piracy system, you have direct connection to Ellis. So if you're interested in piracy, that means you should be able to live here as a pirate, but do your business elsewhere. Ellis is going to be a very industrial system, so connection to there means that you've got an ability to potentially, do your evil deeds in a place where you're not actually living. Bounty hunters are obviously going to have a good shot at some bounties here, or even potentially a bunch of kill warrants from the UEE to help them clear out the system. Miners, you can ensure that you're sufficiently protected if you have the right level of escort. The LC Brave Belt, which was initially stripped of minerals, but new technology means that we've now found mass deposits of precious minerals that were missed before. So I think there's a lot of good potential, profits that could be found there. And I think that's one of those trends that we're going to start seeing in the game is where the profits are, there's going to be risk. And in this system, it's going to be the risk is pirates and marauders and that type of thing. And one of the other ones we talked about, the Star could blow up at any given moment, but there was a lot of money that could be made off of mining. So I think that's going to be the trade-off we can kind of start to see. Outside of that, though, I think, transporting, you might be able to bring in some decent money because we do know that there's short supplies on Lago. So that's going to be it for the Nexus system. If you have questions about this, let me know. Otherwise, as always, stay tuned for more. I'll have some for you soon. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.